If we say an 8-cylinder engine in a Japanese package, that's a big deal. And there's a saying that Lexus never makes a bad car. So let's take a look at a repair on a very old model, the Lexus SC400, produced in 1993. First, make sure you're subscribed to us here. And this time, we're tearing into a Japanese Toyota. When Toyota wanted to step out of its lane in the economy car space, it created an entirely new brand called Lexus, targeting a completely different segment, the world of luxury. This was in the 90s, when the Germans were dominating the scene with luxurious cars carrying massive engines, but their maintenance costs were also very high and quite complex. Among the lineup of models that built the Lexus name, the one we have in this video is the SC400, the 90s production run, equipped with an engine called the 1UZ, with the FA code in a V8 configuration. The 8-cylinder in its base version produced 250 horsepower and 350 newton meters of torque, paired to a 4-speed automatic, with a 5-speed also available in later models. It accelerated from a standstill to 100 in under 7 seconds, which were very impressive numbers for that era.
As for the interior, it came packed with major features and more options, including systems that were new at the time, like ABS, traction control, and cruise control. The specific car in this video is a 1993 model, which had a selling price of $42,000 at the time, meaning if we're talking about an equivalent model today, it could reach $90,000. But after all these years, the American YouTuber manages to pick it up for just $850, and its exterior condition tells you it had literally been abandoned. He loads the car up and brings it to his shop, puts it on the lift, and removes the front wheel to check the condition underneath. Right away from under the car, it looks very similar to a Toyota Supra. He continues uncovering and checking to see what problems he'll be dealing with, and the first thing that catches his eye is the left strut leaking oil.
And gets inside to assess the interior, finding a blown fuse in the interior fuse box, likely the one for the gauges, and replaces it. He checks the engine oil and finds it at the right level and in acceptable condition. He then connects the battery and everything lights up inside. He tries to start it, but nothing happens on the first attempt. Then, the starter motor sound appears and the engine tries to turn over. He tries rotating the crankshaft by hand to confirm there's nothing seized inside, and it turns smoothly with no resistance. So something else is preventing the starter from engaging. The fuel pump sound also isn't audible during the start attempt. He opens the trunk to check and confirm it's working, but discovers the fuel tank is essentially empty, almost no fuel at all. He tries another method through the air intake path. He digs deeper into the problem to try to get the engine running. He pulls the spark plugs, and they clearly haven't been changed in a very long time. He adds a small amount of oil into the cylinders to make piston movement easier and smoother, then bumps the starter just enough to distribute and circulate the oil inside. He then connects the car's ground cable and tries again, but the same result. Plus, now the battery cables are getting hot. He checks the interior fuses and confirms they're all good, then tries again. But the current is causing the battery cables to heat up even more and produce a lot of smoke. At this point, he likely needs a new starter motor, since that's probably the component drawing the excessive current. He puts the car back on the lift, goes underneath, drains the engine oil, removes the front wheel, and pulls the underbody protection covers. He then drains the engine coolant and goes to fully remove the exhaust system. He brings the car back down and continues working. And everything he's doing at this stage is just to pull the engine out.
Finally, after disconnecting everything holding it in, he's able to lift the engine out of the bay and bring it out to work on it comfortably. The starter motor's location makes it difficult to access, which is exactly why he's pulling the whole engine. He then separates the transmission, since that's also being replaced with a new manual unit. Once done with the transmission, he starts lifting and removing the intake manifold from the engine. He creates working room by removing the injectors, and underneath the intake manifold is where the starter motor lives. He cleans everything around it so nothing falls into the engine, then removes it and pulls it out. He then cleans all the intake ports with air, installs a new gasket, swaps in the replacement starter, and closes everything back up. He adjusts the hoses that were on the manifold and also replaces the oil filter with a new one. He then removes the flywheel ring gear that sits between the engine and the old automatic transmission to make a small modification.
The modification involves cutting the ring gear itself and welding it onto a new disc, so everything is compatible with the manual transmission, and he won't have to replace it again if a problem comes up. He temporarily fits the outer bell housing of the new transmission to see how things line up and understand the setup, but discovers the catalytic converter housing is creating a conflict in the middle. He removes it and finds another solution, welding a pipe through it to open up the clearance. After finishing that, he starts torquing the head bolts to their final spec. Then, of course, follows that with installing the manual clutch components. The final step is reinstalling the transmission in its place. And with that, everything is essentially ready to go back in. But before anything, he decides to clean the underside of the car first. Once done, he removes the problematic strut to replace it, strips off the undercoating that had been sprayed on the chassis since it's well past its life, and will apply a fresh coat when done. He continues working to disassemble the entire suspension, since he's also decided to upgrade it to a coilover system.
He also removes the worn components to be replaced, and while working, he discovers the fuel feed lines are in bad shape and need to be refreshed. He then starts installing the new multi-link suspension arms, mounts the new shocks in their positions, and with that, most of the suspension work is complete. He then goes inside to remove the center console and handle the automatic transmission shifter section. He also cuts a new hole next to the brake pedal to route the clutch through, and once done, he assembles the new pedal. The next step is mounting the master cylinder on the new hole in the firewall, then installing the pedal inside the cabin next to the brake. Now he's finally able to install the engine and transmission from underneath, so he lowers the car and starts assembling the mounting bolts and reconnecting everything. He tries to start it, but nothing happens, and there's not even a starter sound.
He was lucky the engine didn't start, because if it had fired without oil, it definitely would have been damaged. He fills the engine with oil, and while he's at it, he tries to track down the no-start issue. He disconnects the wires near the starter and applies power directly to them to test, and the sound is completely normal, just like any engine. He reconnects the connector and tries starting from a different point, and again, the sound is completely normal. So he's confused about exactly where the problem is and why the engine behaves differently when connected to the car's wiring harness components. He puts the engine back in position, but this time without bolting it to the mounts, and tries to start it immediately. As expected, it sounds perfectly normal. He lifts the car again and starts searching for the car's wiring diagrams online, then comes back to investigate further. He discovers that the ground cable is disconnected, not connected at all.
When he connects it and tests, he finds the power is actually reaching the coils. And the real problem is that all the coils had no connection because of that missing ground cable. He corrects everything and prepares for the moment he's been working toward. He connects everything, sprays a bit of fuel into the intake ports, just a simple ignition booster, nothing more. And on the very first attempt, the engine finally turns over. Unfortunately, it shuts off right after because the fuel runs out, but at this point, he's pretty much done with the major part of the job. He then starts finalizing and securing everything into its permanent position. He lowers the Lexus, bolts the engine onto its mounts, and begins connecting all the sensors and connectors to the engine. He tries the engine again from the ignition key, and the sound is completely normal. The next job is the front suspension. He mounts the new shocks in their positions, secures the control arms and the rest of the components, and just from looking at it, you can already tell those coilovers are going to completely transform the feel of this car. He also fits the new wheels on it and finally lowers it to the ground. The next step is connecting the fuel line to the injectors, and he does this using an external fuel container to run the engine briefly. But the car doesn't run well. His suspicion now goes straight to the injectors, so he pulls them out, cleans them thoroughly, and reinstalls them on the engine. Once done, he moves to the fuel tank, located in the trunk, to clean out the rust inside. He then heads back into the interior, lifts the rear seat to access the fuel pump section, and when he gets to it, he finds a cut wire among the connections. And the remaining connections aren't in great shape either, clearly worn with age and in need of replacement. He lifts the car again for roughly the 10th time and goes underneath to remove the tank mounting bolts, drops it down, loosens the fasteners from inside the trunk, and is finally able to easily slide it out. He pulls the pump module that was sitting inside and removes it, then also pulls the float that measures the fuel level. He fills the tank with vinegar and drops a metal chain inside to help scrub the interior clean. When done, he starts sanding the outside, then preps and sprays it in a fresh coat. He then makes new wiring connections for the pump, soldering them together, seals up the tank, and it's ready to go back in. He cleans the mounting area thoroughly first, then bolts everything back up. The next step is lifting the car again to replace the last remaining part of the fuel system, the filter. He removes it from the line it's clamped to on both sides, makes some modifications to the pipes by cutting out the sections that aren't needed or compromised, installs the new filter in its place, and seals it all up. He then adds fuel to the tank, heads inside to start the car, and turns the key. But first needs to confirm the connections he made are secure, since they involve fuel lines and any leak would be a serious problem. He checks from underneath and sure enough finds a section leaking because it wasn't clamped tightly enough. He lifts the car again, tightens it firmly, brings it back down, and now it's the most important moment in the video. He turns the key, and finally the 8-cylinder engine fires up on the very first attempt, running smoothly and sounding absolutely beautiful. He gives it a few revs to bring the RPMs up, and the sound is unlike any V8 he's heard before. He lifts the car and removes the exhaust pipes to access and install the clutch master cylinder on the transmission. He closes up the top section, adds oil, and we also see him bleeding the clutch pedal to make it lighter. He then lifts the Lexus again to secure the shifter from underneath, but first needs to remove the transmission mount bracket to create clearance. And after that, he bolts it in easily and closes the transmission back up. Once finished, he replaces the brake fluid lines with fresh ones. The next step is assembling the two sections of the drive shaft together and installing them. He first secures the center support bracket, then goes to the transmission end and bolts that section in.
He repeats the same process for the rear section, connecting it to the differential. While working, he notices one of the power steering oil hoses has a problem, so he removes it and replaces it with a new one, then refills the fluid to replace what was lost. While he's at it, he also adds transmission fluid to get it ready, then mounts the wheels, and finally lowers the car to the ground. The last step, which he had been saving for the very end, is replacing the spark plugs with a fresh set. And with that, the beautiful 8-cylinder engine buried inside this old car is fully complete. The last thing he does is wash it, and after that he of course takes it out for a test drive. A very satisfying drive. Thank you so much if you made it this far, and let us know in the comments what Modi you'd like to see next. I already know your answer before you write it, so stay tuned for a very strong video from us on a Lexus LFA repair.